Chapter 2. It is the middle of the night, growled the old man. What is it that you want? Please, we need a doctor, Muddy told him. My son, he is very sick. Please. Then from the further inside the house came another voice, a woman's voice. Who is it, Hans? Is it more of them? Let them in. The door opened wider, and we saw then a lady in a dressing gown coming down a huge wide staircase and then hurrying towards us across the hallway. She says they need a doctor, Countess, the old man said. They were both peering at us now from behind the lamplight. We are from Dresden, Muddy told them. Am I seeing things, the lady asked, or is that an elephant? I can explain about that later, Muddy replied, but my son is ill, seriously ill, and I have to find a doctor. Please, it is urgent. The lady did not hesitate. She took Muddy by the arm and led her into the hallway. Come in, she said. I shall send for a doctor from the village right away. And Hans, you will find a place for that animal in the stables. I had no idea that night who these people were, and neither did I care. We would soon have a doctor for Carly, and we had found shelter for him, too. That was all that mattered. And it would be warm, too. I could even smell food. But I did not get to go in right away. Muddy asked me to take care of Marlene and to make sure that she had something to eat and drink. So, led by Hans, the old man in the nightcap, who muttered angrily to himself the whole time, I took her around the side of the house, through the great archway, and into the stable yard. I saw to it that she had all she needed, hay and water both, and left her to it. She seemed quite happy, happier, certainly, than the horses across the yard from her, who were becoming increasingly unsettled at the appearance of this strange intruder. As we walked back toward the house, the place seemed immense to me, more like a castle than a house. Hans was still grumbling on, but less to himself and rather more to me, about how he could never get a good night's sleep any more, how it was bad enough that the Countess had opened her doors to all in sundry, but now she was turning the stable yard into a zoo. It was all too much, he said, too much. It was not until he was leading me back into the house and up the grand staircase that I began to see for myself what he was complaining about. Everywhere I looked, every centimeter of floor space was occupied. People were lying fast asleep in the corridors of the landings and, I presumed, in every room. And those that were not asleep were sitting there on a straw-filled sack, looking up at me blankly as I passed by. There was bewilderment on every face I saw. Hans took me up to the top of the house, to the attic, where I saw Carly lying stretched out on a mattress by a fire, with Muddy kneeling over him, bathing his forehead. Peter was busy piling more wood on the fire. He has a fever, Elizabeth, Muddy said, looking up at me, her eyes full of tears. He's burning up. Where is that doctor? Where is he? For the rest of that night, Carly lay there tossing and turning, sometimes delirious, and all three of us took turns to try to cool him. None of us slept. We just sat there watching him, hoping the fever would leave him, longing for the doctor to come. When he did come at long last, the lady came with him, dressed now rather grandly in all black. The doctor examined him and said that Carly should be kept warm at all costs, and that the more water we could get him to drink, the better. The doctor gave us some medicine for Carly and told us that on no account was he to get out in the cold or travel until he was completely well again. It was only now, once he had gone, that the lady in black introduced herself. Everyone just calls me Countess, she said, shaking each of us rather formally by the hand. We do not bother much with names here. It is safer that way. I think we have about 70 refugees now in the house, all sorts, mostly families from the east resting up for a few days. Everyone is passing through. It seems as if the whole world is in flight. We have soldiers on their way home on leave or returning to their regiments at the front. Some deserters, no doubt, and we have a few vagrants, too. I ask no questions. We have a hot meal only once a day at midday, and then soup and bread in the evening. It is not much, but it is the best we can manage, I'm afraid. As you know, food is becoming very scarce everywhere now. You may stay as long as you like, certainly until the young boy is better, but I would not advise you to stay on much longer after that. The Russians are not so far away now, maybe a few weeks away, no more. The Americans are closer, by all accounts, but who knows who will get here first. Muddy thanked her from the bottom of her heart for all her kindness towards us. Having said I asked no questions, the Countess went on, with a smile, I have to say that I am rather curious about the elephant. As Muddy told her the story about working in the zoo, about Poppy being away fighting in Russia, and about our escape with Marlene from Dresden, the Countess listened intently. Then she said, I too had a husband in the army once, but he is dead now. And like you, I also have a son. Like your husband, he is fighting the Russians in the east. Maybe they know one another. You never know. She was looking very directly at Peter now. My son is just about your age, I think, she said. And he has brown eyes, deep set like yours. It is my greatest wish to see him again, alive and well. We can only hope. We stayed on with the Countess for several days. It took Carly 3 or 4 of those days to recover. Peter gave him the compass to look after, and that made Carly so happy. He would go to sleep clutching it in his fist. I remember he told Peter once that it was better than a teddy bear. And he said afterwards, when he was well again, that he was sure it was Peter's compass that had made him better in the end, and not the doctor's medicine. Muddy did not want to risk setting out again on our travels until she was quite sure that Carly was strong enough. The trouble was that the longer we stayed and the more comfortable we became, the more we did not want to leave. We would sit down at midday with all the other refugees in the great dining hall and eat good hot food. It was the Countess who was responsible for creating a feeling of great fellowship among us. She made us all so welcome. She took time and trouble with everybody. She was generous, too, and thoughtful. When Carly told her he was good at juggling one day, she gave him 2 tennis balls. If he was happy, it would help him to get better, she said. As the Countess had told us, all sorts of people were there, coming and going, and everyone had a story to tell, and as it turned out, a song to sing as well. There was a group of 20 or so school children that arrived just a day or so after we did. These were the children we got to know best, and of course that was because of Marlene and Carly too. Once Carly told them, and naturally he wasted no time in doing this, that we had an elephant living in the garden back at home, that we had brought her here with us, that she was living out in the stable yard right now, we could not keep them away. With Carly getting stronger every day now, it was impossible to keep him inside for long. Muddy tried to make him stay on this mattress up in the attic, but he was forever going missing. We always knew where to find him, of course. He would be down there with Marlene, both of them surrounded by a large audience of admirers. The school children were utterly amazed by the elephant, and they loved to watch Carly doing his juggling tricks too. But what they loved best of all was when Carly decided he would perform his juggling act high up there, astride Marlene's neck. And that was how Carly, quite unintentionally, landed us all in very great danger. One afternoon, I came into the stable yard with Peter and Muddy looking for Carly, who had disappeared yet again. We saw him sitting up there on Marlene and juggling away. There was a whole crowd around him. Hans, the Countess' manservant, was there, and 40, maybe 50 of our fellow refugees, and the school children, and Carly was showing off even more than usual. As he juggled, he was telling everyone about how he had ridden Marlene all the way from Dresden. I shall never know what made him do it, but suddenly he just stopped his juggling, plugged his hands into his pocket, and held up the compass. "You know what this is?" he said proudly. "This is my big brother Peter's magic compass. He just follows where the arrow points, and we follow him. It is how we got here. Simple." "Juggle with it," one of the school children called out. "I bet you cannot do it with 3. Then they were all clamoring for him to dare to do it. "Go on, Carly, go on." I shouted at him not to, but I knew even then that it was no use, that he would be unable to resist the temptation to show off even more. I pushed my